Greetings. My name is Dale Kiefer. What follows is an excerpt from my novel entitled The Truth as We Know It, a work of speculative fiction that takes place in the distant future. One of my protagonists, Stephen Maytwan, is a professor who's being forced to moonlight as a straw man for a company of blowhards on a 24-hour news feed that's beamed into the brains of all Americans. As this scene begins, Maytwan is being held captive in a cell at the media house where he works after assaulting one of the network's hosts on the air in a fit of rage. Maytwan's head was buried in his hands when the door was pulled open. He didn't even notice it at first. An oil drum of a man shoved his shoulder and then grabbed it, pulling him to his feet. The screen above this barrel's head showed his angry words in a bold, aggressive font, even as his voice reader hammered them out. This somehow made him even more intimidating. Stand up. HR. Now. An appropriately terse command directing Maytwan to his inevitable fate. As he was being gripped to the part of the building where human resources was housed, he wondered for the first time whether or not they would press criminal charges against him. He really had gone way off script, and he had definitely beaten a man in front of millions of people. Well, he considered Jankum, the host, to be subhuman on most days, but that opinion probably wouldn't hold up in court. He was unceremoniously thrown into the office of the HR man who had hired him several years ago and pushed into a dead chair that was low to the ground. The HR operative was a wiry man with patchy skin and an oversized tricorn hat who surveyed him with a condescending smirk. Maytwan couldn't remember his name, and when the man began zanging him, he found that he had saved him in his memory only as HR Guy. There were a few silent seconds during which Maytwan assumed the barrel and the hat were discussing whether or not the former was needed for protection against him. Evidently, based on the big man's departure, he was not. Well, sang the hat, his words flowing into each other. Maytwan did not reply. The hat walked in circles around him with his hands behind his back as though he were a thoughtful and benevolent master, troubled at being forced to find a way to punish a petulant child who had strayed from the proper path. Maytwan figured that, in reality, he was relishing every second of their encounter. We meet again, Mr. Maytwan. I knew that it would be this way. How did I know? Well, you don't spend over 20 years in the business of managing people without being able to pick out the ones who will cause all of the trouble. I'm only just surprised that it took this long. He ceased his circling and sat in a pleasure chair facing Maytwan, shaking his head and looking down at him with piercing eyes. Do you enjoy teaching, Mr. Maytwan? Yes. And do you enjoy the work that you do here at the American News Network? No. The bridges were already burned. There was no point in lying or even trying to dilute the obvious truth. Why is that? Because it's dehumanizing. I take a lot of abuse doing this, and the people I'm supposed to represent are unfairly maligned, and they aren't anything like the parts we're forced to play anyhow. The hat stared at him for a few seconds with the same condescending smirk. This couldn't have been the first time that he had ever heard such a thing from a disgruntled employee, but he was clearly unconvinced. I've been getting a great deal of communication from upstairs since your little tantrum earlier today, Mr. Maytwan. What if I was to tell you that the response to your crazy stunt has been overwhelmingly positive? Positive? Maytwan was so surprised he almost said it out loud. Yes, it seems you really are onto something this time. I know that you have a long history of deviating from our scripts, of doing whatever you darn well please. Those rebellious acts, or creative flourishes, as I'm sure you might call them, have certainly been a nuisance to us. But we kept you around all of this time, fortunately it seems, because now you've really devised something that we can run with all the way to the bank. It's a shame that you missed your true calling. You should have been one of our writers. I don't understand. Why weren't they just firing him already? Getting it over with. We want to keep you on here at the American News Network playing Paco Ilegales full time. This opportunity will give you a chance to hone your skills without the distractions of playing other characters and that manipulative thing you do to the youth, which you call teaching. What? Matron is at a loss for further words. Oh, sure, you're thinking about how and why this is happening. The answer is that the people love your act. That footage of you on the floor getting your face kicked in has now been viewed by every man, woman, and child in America. For a long time, people have enjoyed seeing our friend Paco get speared by the host, Mr. Jenkum, no doubt about that. But they absolutely love seeing him, and that is you, get the mother-loving chip beaten out of him by a patriotic team of real Americans. And who can blame them? After all, Paco deserves it. He's not an American, but he's taken jobs away from Americans, just like you have. I am an American, damn it. I teach American history, and I know more about it than you and your network flunkies ever will. I love America. Trust me, Mr. Matron, we know what goes on in those classes of yours, and you are decidedly un-American. Your values, your worldview, your whole ethos, really, are anathema to the true American spirit. We might have considered your ideas to be dangerous if they weren't so quaint and outdated. They'll never really catch on here beyond the few fractured minds that perennially haunt your college dream factory. Nonetheless, we've directed your other employer, Communist Terrorist University, that bastion of liberal indoctrination, to strip you of your professor's title with immediate effect. If you do manage, however, to do a serviceable job of playing illegales for a few years, then maybe we'll grant you a teaching assistant position for a class or two. Barring that, I'm sure that some European university would be glad to hire you. Your sort of radicalism is still in fashion over there, is it not? Matron ignored the question. I don't have to take this. I quit. He rose from his chair, for the first time feeling the stabbing pain in his chest from where he had been kicked repeatedly in the ribs. The pain made him halt for a split second before turning around to exit the room. The hat was unfazed. Not so fast, Mr. Matron. Surely a bleeding heart like yours can't have forgotten the impact that charity can have on a person's life. Matron stopped, but did not turn around. Who paid for your education, Mr. Matron? As I recall, it was the American News Network, was it not? Matron turned around, but gave no reply. As you no longer wish to be in our employ, let me remind you of your obligation to return the funds that we most generously donated to your impersonal enrichment. Of course, if you don't have a spare $400 or $500 billion lying around, we could let you work off that debt here at the network. Or if you'd rather, we could just hold you here until the money materializes somehow. Perhaps you could beg the government to bail you out at the taxpayers' expense, though they're just as broke as you are. I would suggest wishing upon a star, but there's no guarantee that you'll ever see one again if you refuse the opportunity we're offering you. This is like slavery. We still have laws in America, you know? It's more like indentured servitude, actually. See, you're not much of a historian, are you? As for those laws, well, we're working on that. Public opinion is on our side. We intend to stomp out every last bit of this nasty, intrusive progressivism that's been curdling the American dream for centuries now. And slavery? That's next on our list. After all, Moses owned slaves, Washington owned slaves, Grant owned slaves. Need I even continue? Original intent at its purest, Mr. Matron. Do you think you can do this to me and you think I'll just stay silent about it? Yes, you'll shout and complain, all right. But where and to whom? You certainly can't use our network. There are a million places I could go online to be heard. You can't control me there. Yes, I urge you to do that. Get out there and spread your story around. You'll be just another madman screaming in the dark. You'll be just as crazy as those fringe groups who believe that we came from monkeys. You're either with us or against us, Mr. Matron. And if you're against us, you must be with big government, the deep state, and nobody wants to be aligned with them anymore. And if you're with the government, attacking us, slandering the underdog who's looking out for the little guy, well, let's just see how far you'll get. Underdog? What underdog? You own and control every media outlet in the country. You're not a dissenting voice that fights for the little guy against the establishment. You are the establishment. Well, that's your opinion. I encourage you to hold it and to share it. Shout it from some mountaintop somewhere, any time of the day or night. Go ahead. After all, this is a free country. But I can assure you that there's an actual truth here, and that truth is that we are on the side of the American people. Just ask any man on the street, and he'll tell you. We support the annihilation of the enemies of America. We support the proliferation of God-given rights, and we support the freedom of every individual American to reach the greatest heights possible for him. It's men like you who stand in the way. This is not over. I'll find a way to... My attorney will be contacting you. The hat completely ignored this threat. All right, Mr. Maytoin, splendid work today, but I'm finished with you now. Please be on your way. As you've already done the network such a fine service this morning, I think we'll give you the next couple of days off. Consider this a free handout. Rest up. Go on home and lick those wounds of yours. You'll need to be healthy for your new assignment. I'll have my assistant send you your new terms of employment before the end of the day. Maytoin hesitated, forming a reply, but then decided against it, and stormed out of the hat's office. This was not the end. No way in hell. Thank you. Whew.